All right, we are live on YouTube. And welcome to everybody. We're just getting started. We'll wait till everybody has a chance to join in for a couple of minutes, and then we'll begin. Thank you for joining us this evening. This is the Renters Alliance Renter Town Hall. And we'll get started in just a few. If you're just joining us, this is the Renters Alliance Renter Town Hall. We usually wait just a couple of minutes to let people sign in, and then we'll begin. Give it one more minute. Those of you just signing on, this is the Renters Alliance Renter Town Hall. Welcome. We usually give a minute or two to let people sign in, and then we'll get started.
I don't know, I'm having trouble. I guess.
Getting there. Okay. That does it for me. Let's get started. Good evening, everyone. My name is Matt Losack. I'm the co-founder and executive director of the Montgomery County Renters Alliance. A couple of things about tonight. If you are an attendee, we ask you to put your questions and concerns in the chat. We will get to them as we go. So if you have your hands up, don't do that. Put your questions or concerns in the chat and we'll get to it. We have a number of people who will be joining us this evening. We are waiting for the county executive, Mark Elrich, who will join us in a few minutes. Let me quickly introduce some of the people who are here this evening. With us is my staff, Melek Demir, Pat Beckham, and David Mullins. They will be monitoring the chat and the questions and make sure we get to as many as we possibly can before the end of the program. I'm also here with Josh Fisher, who is a Renters Alliance board member, and with Mr. Frank Demaray, who is the Deputy Director of the Department of Housing and Community Affairs. I'm also pleased to have with us the chair of the Board of the Directors for the Montgomery County Renters Alliance, William Roberts, and of course, the chief of the Services to End and Prevent Homelessness, Amanda Harris, who will be leading our conversation and overview tonight of the phase 4 of the COVID rent relief program. Very, very important to all of us, and especially those renters who are at risk of eviction due to COVID. So let me welcome our board chair for some opening remarks. William?
Well, thanks, Matt, and good evening, everyone. It's good to be with you this evening virtually. Thank you for joining us. As Matt said, I'm William Roberts. I'm the chair of the board of directors of the Montgomery County Renters Alliance. And for those of you who are new to our town halls, which we hold twice a month, and new to the Renters Alliance, want to make sure you know that the Renters Alliance was established back in 2010 as the first and only regional nonprofit dedicated exclusively to renter outreach, advocacy, education, and organizing. And we work with tenants both to help keep them in their homes and also to help advocate for themselves individually and in the policy processes of the county and our state. And We're an alliance that's really made up of more than 30 nonprofits, civic, religious, labor organizations, as well as thousands of renters and renter activists that are part of this community. And we offer these renter town halls and have been doing so in collaboration and partnership with our partners from the county, some of whom Matt introduced, with the goal of ensuring that all renters, especially those in communities that are most at risk for eviction and those who might be, facing, abuse or neglect, receive vital information about their rights and responsibilities. It's the core function of what we do, but also to make sure that we are sharing the resources that are available to make sure that we can together protect quality, affordable housing and ensure stability in our housing community, keeping people in their homes. And so, in between our town halls, our Renters Alliance staff and volunteers are busy in the community, even during COVID, distributing information, going door to door in apartment communities across the county, and making sure that folks are informed about their rights and about how they can have access to some of the services we'll be talking about tonight. And many of you, with us this evening have received some of that information and been in contact with our staff in that regard. And so, the work that we continue to do, we think is critically important because of the issue that we're trying to tackle, right? And so we know that Montgomery County, like many parts of our region, is in the midst of a rental housing crisis. And, according to our housing department, there are as many as 10 to 15,000 renters, renters who make their home in Montgomery County, who remain behind in their rent. It's a serious issue. And since January, we know that at least 80 families that we know of have been evicted from their homes. And that number is really just a fraction of the story. It tells just a fraction of the story because there are many renters who unfortunately self-evict, when they've received a confusing or threatening notice from their landlord, and folks who are, so behind in the rent that they don't see a hope of recovery. And so we know that there are folks that we're, losing in the gaps and the cracks, and we're trying desperately with our partners to make sure that those folks don't get lost, because even, and certainly pre-COVID was not the high water mark for the state of the eviction crisis and the rental housing crisis. We know, right, about the affordability crunch that we're all in, but the pandemic, really forced many middle and low income families deeper into poverty, where thousands of folks lost their jobs or saw their hours reduced, saw their jobs change, right? And so, really fell into this cycle where, with each passing month, they got deeper and deeper behind. And, it puts families in a really desperate situation, really needing help. And without programs like the rent relief that we've seen at the county level and some of the other programs that we saw at the height of the pandemic, folks would be facing utter disaster, and many people are, without being able to get into some of those programs. And so, that's why we've been really critically engaged in this work throughout the course, of these last couple of years through COVID and even before. And it's challenging at times because there are some voices, especially as we are, even with cases, we've seen the report, right, of COVID cases rising slowly here. But for the most part, there's a sense of normalcy coming back in a lot of segments of society and our lives. And so when you look at an issue like this one that we all work on, there are some voices, unfortunately, that say, well, sort of tough luck, right? We shouldn't be providing additional interventions. We need to get back to normal. We've got to let, sort of market forces take their course. That's how society works. And, that's not certainly what I believe as a person, but as an organization and a community of folks who have been working on these issues That's not how we see things at all. We know, in fact, that there's a huge cost to not, helping people stay in their homes and to not making sure that there's stability, across the rental housing sector. And so we know that evictions don't just harm the folks who are impacted by them; they deeply harm communities, whether that's disruption, increased, mental, physical, and emotional health strain, increased drawdowns on our safety net and pushing people into homelessness, and certainly the impact on families with children, who are really impacted as they're trying to get back to an equilibrium in our schools. We know that the correlation between kids who are forced to move in and out of rental housing here and there, and schools are just their academics are disrupted, and that can mean lower academic outcomes for them, lower productivity. And so it's really critical that we connect all of these dots to make sure that we keep families and communities whole. And so that's why we believe, in the end, the work that we do as an organization, the work that you're going to hear about tonight from the county, and the rental relief program, and trying to get this money into the hands as many people as possible who need it and can use it immediately. That's critical, right? And the work that we do to be able to get that information out there, that the investment that the county has made in organizations like ours and other partners that do outreach, education, and support for renters is really critical every day to making sure that we reduce those overall costs. And so we look forward, of course, to working with the county as we're getting this information out and continuing to be a partner there. But we also, look forward to the county to continuing to support the work that the Renters Alliance and other allied organizations are doing, to help us maintain it and indeed increase it, because the need is increasing, right? To invest in the renters' rights, rental code enforcement issues, and rent relief, to make sure that that gets to our community's most vulnerable residents. And so I'm really happy again to be with all of you tonight to talk about these critical dollars that are now available again in the county, and how we can work to get those out to the door to people who need the most immediately. And Matt, I don't know if the county executive has joined us yet. I haven't seen.
Well, I see him that he was actually in the attendees list. We'll see. I've invited him to become a panelist. Let's see if he's able to do that. County Executive, are you with us? Maybe.
He's somewhere in there. Well,
somewhere in the ether.
While you work to sort of pull him out of the ether, Matrix style, I want to be sure to mention, that we, of course, have always enjoyed a great partnership with the county executive, as at this county executive and previous county executive, their focus on renter issues. But that, County Executive Elrich, was with the Renters Alliance back in the beginning, when we formed out of the work of the tenants work group, Matt, that you were on, where the recommendation came down, right, to form sort of an alliance, an organized voice for tenants in the county and the community. And so, so I hope that we can find him, because we definitely want to hear from him. And there he is.
Well, not quite. I think we let's take the moment that we need to also welcome Dr. Rosetta Robinson. We sit on the board of the Emergency Assistance Coalition, which is a coalition of the Interfaith Works, and that coalition represents many nonprofits and organizations like ours that work with some of the most desperate renters in the county. Dr. Robinson, I know you're juggling, like many of us, a number of activities. Do you want to just quickly introduce yourself, the EAC, and say hello?
Well, thank you so much, Matt. And I just left one meeting and I said, I just have to make sure that I'm able to be here with the Renters Alliance because you and the work you're doing is so significant to the work that we've been doing for over 25 years as a coalition. And we have many members who have been working, being on the front lines, providing services, assistance, support to our nonprofits, to people in need in the county for over 50 years. And committed to doing this work. And we are very, appreciative of our collaborations with the Renters Alliance, as well as with the county and other groups, just to continue to lift up the needs that are in the county, as well as something that my predecessors would say, even before I joined, is that we cannot do it alone. We have to address it together. And it's always a constant everyday thing, trying to work together to support those in need. And many of our providers help thousands of people in need. And appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Robinson. Thanks for promoting this event to your constituency. As I say, the Renters Alliance is a proud member of the board of the Emergency Assistance Coalition. And we know that many of the members are working directly with some of the most vulnerable residents in our county. So thank you very much for that. Thanks for stopping by, as they say. And we are still waiting for our county executive to hook in. He's obviously doing multiple events at the same time. But not to put you on the spot, but Deputy Director Desmarais, do you want to address some of the issues of the rent cap now and then jump off if the county executive pops in?
Yes, well, I'll address verbally here. I'll put some things in the chat for those who can access that. So the county had, for the last 2 years, a maximum increase percentage imposed at the time the rent increase notice is given. And that has been until this past Sunday. It was 0.4%, which is indexed off of an annual average rent increase in the metro area that the county's been publishing for 30 years, called the Voluntary Rent Guideline. But that maximum increase percentage has ended. So now, as of Monday, we are back to where we were before the COVID emergency legislation. There is no maximum rent increase percentage in the county. The only place where we have any rent increase limits is in the city of Tacoma Park. So landlords have to provide at least 90 days notice. They have a structure for that notice, which includes on a lease renewal, offering a 2-year lease option. But the fundamentals are that if a landlord issues a rent increase notice today for a September 1 rent increase, there is no maximum. The encouragement to the landlords is to work with their tenants to moderate rent increases, to accept, to work with, helping tenants maintain their housing. It's very expensive for landlords to turn over units, but there is no legal restriction. If a tenant believes that a landlord has not given proper notice, or if there are other circumstances with the notice that he thinks in violation of landlord-tenant law, and I'll send a link to the landlord-tenant handbook and to the web pages that include a lot of this information. A tenant can, register a complaint, file a complaint, call 311, or go to the county's Department of Housing Community Affairs landlord-tenant affairs complaint. I'll put links in there, but can register a complaint, and we will look into and assign an investigator. We can work with the tenant to help in communicating with the landlord, but we do not have a legal maximum and cannot require a landlord to not offer rent at a higher rate, a higher rent amount than the tenant believes they can afford. So we are back to the market as it was.
Thank you, Frank. Unfortunately, I think I'm going to ask you to repeat all that again when we get to the end of the town hall.
Yes.
It's so important and confusing for people. And I want to also get into a little bit more about the landlord tenants enforcement abilities. William, I think our county executive is available to us. Mark, you almost look like you were there. but it also looked like there was a tornado about to come down above you. So we hope you're still on the ground. Let us know. Now he's gone again. It was the tornado. Well, we are rocking and rolling this evening. Let's see, landlord jokes. No, let's go to Amanda Harris. Amanda, you're probably going to be interrupted, but we do want to get into the COVID rent relief program. Amanda is the chief of the Services to End and Prevent Homelessness, and I know she has a PowerPoint for us. So go right ahead, Amanda, and I will tap you privately in the chat if it looks like the county executive is able to join us.
Okay, sounds great. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me, and thank you to our partners at DHCA and the Renters Alliance. This is a very difficult time for many people, and I'm kind of seeing the things that are coming through the chat and have heard about the deep concern about rising rents and landlords not renewing leases or trying to renew leases with 10, 20% rent increases. And so that is a real issue that we're seeing across the board, and that's having an impact on vacancy rates and being able to find places for people to live. So this is certainly something that's on my mind, and I hope that together we can think about some advocacy efforts. If we can't put a cap on the rent increase, what else can we do? One example that I know we've talked about in this room many times is a just cause eviction. So landlords can't actually stop your lease just because the 12 months are over, that they would actually have to have a reason to terminate your lease. So I think that wouldn't solve all the problems, but it's certainly a step in the right direction. So I won't go on and on about policy because I know you're here to learn about the rent relief program. So let me take a moment to share my screen. Okay, everyone see that? Yes. Okay. All right, so the COVID rent relief round 4, this is our 4th round of rent relief. We've been doing this since May of 2020, so just 2 months after the pandemic started. For this current round, it does look a little bit different from previous rounds. The portal did open on Monday, and I'll give you there's the link down at the bottom of the PowerPoint. We'll also make sure that we put that in the chat so you can go directly to that link to apply. So for this round, the eligibility criteria, so you still need to have some sort of COVID-related financial hardship. So it doesn't mean that you must have lost your job specifically because of COVID. It could be that you yourself contracted COVID and you were out sick for a long period of time. And so you lost wages and you got behind in rent, or you had a family member that tested positive, or unfortunately had a family member pass away, anything related to COVID that impacted your finances. If you had to stay home from work because the schools were closed and you didn't have any childcare, that would also qualify you. So we strongly encourage anyone who thinks they might have some sort of COVID-related financial hardship to go ahead and apply. As far as income, we are capping at 50% of the area median income or below. So for a household of 4, that's an annual income of $71,000 or a monthly gross income of around $6,000. For a household of 2, it's just about $57,000 annual and $4,700 monthly gross income.
Amanda, I think we have the county executive with us, and I know that he's going on to the next meeting. If we could unscreen and unscreen and descreen our county executive. County Executive Alberts, thank you for joining us. We know you're going from meeting to meeting, but we thought it was important that we get your point of view on the end of the rent cap and the launching again of the COVID rent relief program phase 4. We're eager to hear your perspective. County Executive Alberts.
And thank you for having me here, and thank you for all the work you always do. I'm happy that we've launched the rent relief again. It's, we're still struggle with the caps because the amount of money forces us to make decisions about, how far we can go in terms of rent relief and what are the incomes we can serve. I wish that we could serve everybody, but the 50% cap, particularly with the inclusion of utilities, is probably an unfortunate necessity. I'm really worried about what's going to happen with rents. And so we're putting together a proposal to the council to reinstate the rent stabilization, probably at 3% for another 6 months to a year, depending what we think the appetite of the council is. I'm very worried about what's going to happen to tenants. I don't see any way this ends well. I expect to see pretty large rent increases. I think that's been the case in other jurisdictions. We can already see what's happening with rent increases. I would be surprised if the same thing doesn't wind up happening here. And so hopefully the council will adopt something to carry us through the year, and then hopefully we can elect a council that have a serious discussion about rent stabilization. To be blunt, I've been looking at the county's housing policy. I think that we claim to be a lot better than we are. I was looking at the moderately priced dwelling unit program. We've got 6,700 MPDUs. We've got about 15,000 vouchers in the NHOC. And that's about it for affordable housing. And it's not nearly enough units. It doesn't match the needs in the community that exist today, and it's not going to match the needs of people who are coming here. So we're looking at some other things we can do on rental production. I think you saw we just put 18 of our properties up for bid to nonprofit or for affordable housing developers, and we're looking at projects that'll focus on ownership for tenants, but also rental. But we want to give tenants an opportunity to own. And if we're looking at affordability levels of 30% of AMI up to 100% of AMI, so we can deal with a broader range of people who just simply can't find housing in the housing market today. I don't know what the new council brings, but I hope you all grill the council members, council candidates and executive candidates about, what's their position on keeping affordable housing in the county, and, what are their plans as housing starts to disappear because of affordability. What are they going to do? Are they just going to say that's the market, and whatever the market does is what we have to accept? I'm not a market person. I'm not a fan of the Koch brothers or Ronald Reagan. So I don't have any confidence that that there will be any trickle down effect if we don't do something actively about dealing with rent prices in the county. And we'll see. Will Joando has said that if I send it over there, he'll support it.
Well, that's
So we'll
big
see.
news, County Executive. And one thing I wanted to ask you, and I know that it comes up quite a bit from renters and colleagues who think about housing policy. We hear a lot about Thrive as a planning program for the county. We hear a lot from developers and landlords and others interested in affordable housing who believe that we can preserve and protect the residents' housing today by building more apartments down the road. And we're concerned that maybe even if that were true, it will not protect and preserve people's homes now. And certainly not for the people in the middle and lower income who are struggling as we speak. According to DHCA, between 10 and 15,000 renters at any one time now are in arrears. What are your thoughts on that?
I think Thrive is a total fraud. Just to be blunt.
What are you trying to say, Mr.
I'm supposed to say that. I think what I'm trying to say is this is supposed to be a plan for 2050. And I don't know how you plan for 2050 when you know that, say, 24,000 renters today make about $30,000 and can't find affordable housing. There's another 20,000 who earn up to $50,000 and they can't find affordable housing. So that's, what is it, 44,000 people? Park and Planning projects we're going to lose 11,000 affordable housing units by 2030. So now we're up to 55,000 people, and they claim that of the next 40,000 households, 3/4 of those people will need subsidy. So 3/4 of 40 is another 30,000 people. Thrive doesn't talk about the needs of the county at all. It has no plan for how to go about getting affordable housing. There is like zero chance. I mean, I guess their notion is if you build more housing, the older buildings will get less expensive. And then someday in the distant future, they'll become affordable to people. That's not a real world solution. And
But
they're
we
counting on,
we understand that demand in our region is some of the highest in the country. And so even if we met some of that demand, the demand would continue to be high. But you're proposing, which I believe is news, a rent cap program to extend the existing rent cap program for Montgomery County. I
Yeah.
think that would be extraordinary. Will, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, sorry, and good to see you, County Executive. As you know, the Renters Alliance has been, sort of at the forefront of fighting for the cap, not just for the extension that just expired, but originally, right? And so, unfortunately, we weren't able to push as far as we think was necessary, given what we thought was the deepness of this crisis, which we're going to see now that the cap has been relieved and so removed. And so I'm happy to hear your interest in pushing more, and Councilmember Gerwando's willingness, it seems, to work with you on it. I'm wondering, not to ask you to peer into the crystal ball, but I mean, we're in the middle of this crisis right now, right? And so, as you mentioned, with the cap being released, folks who are on this call to get information about the COVID rent relief program kind of find themselves in a corner, right? Where they're not sure what they're going to get hit with in terms of the increases from their landlord, not sure how long it will take them to get through the program to get relief, which just, is sort of covering, trying to get them current, right? And so I'm just wondering, the clock is not on our side, right? And so both, what do advocates here and renters need to be doing as you send this over? Not sure what the timeline is, but we want to treat this as the crisis moment that it is, which I know you do also.
I think, you've got to make it real for people. People have got to understand, what a 10% rent increase might mean for somebody and how that affects their ability to pay their bills. I mean, it's really concerning that people don't talk about it from the perspective of people who have to rent. And we know that if these rent increases come, nobody's, if you're eligible today, you're only eligible because you lost your job because of COVID. You get no relief if you lost your job because you can't afford, or you lost your apartment because you can't afford the rent.
Right.
And we don't have our rental assistance program is, a couple $100 for a limited period of time. It's not going to help anybody get through long-term sustained rent increases. So I'm deeply concerned. I think that some people who would very much like to see the county change may well get their wish, because this could seriously push out people. But, Matt made a point about demand. I mean, the truth is the demand for the market housing we meet every year. If developers if there was real demand out there, there's 40,000 or more units right now that have been approved. And if there was demand for them in the real world, they would be built. They're not being built because the landlords want rents for those buildings that tenants can't pay. So you may have tenants who would like a better unit, but they can't pay the rents that the landlords are going to ask for those units. So that's a real problem. So they're not being built at all. The only stuff being built is high-end market and the required MPDUs that go along with it. If you go to Bethesda right now, One bedrooms are $2,500 to $3,000 or more. Two bedrooms are $4,000 to $5,000. People can't afford those kind of rents. You could buy a house for less than that.
The people who are paying $3,000 to $7,000 a month can't afford those rents. And we've heard from them. They didn't start off that way, and now that's what they're
Yep.
paying. And it's taking over half of their income or more to stay in their homes. On June 22nd, Mr. Elrich, we will be hosting a renter town hall specifically focused on seniors and rental housing. And we will be doing outreach to every senior renter community in Montgomery County that our staff can get to through our colleagues and through our staff.
Yeah.
And we will invite you back for that. But there is a real issue of not only low income and working families struggling to maintain their households, but this larger and larger senior bubble, senior resident community in Montgomery County, who wherever they are on the economic spectrum, are still living on fixed incomes.
Yeah.
Any last remarks, Mr. Elrich?
Yeah, I just wanted, I've been looking at these notes about MPDUs. The other thing I wanted to explain to people is, the county doesn't build MPDUs. MPDUs are what we get when somebody builds a market rate development. We get between 12.5% and 15%. So when they've satisfied the demand for market units, the expensive units, they don't build anymore. Nobody's going to build anymore if there's not a market for their product. And so MPDUs are totally dependent on the high end of the market being built. And so if you wanted to get 30,000 MPDUs, if that was your goal over the next 8 years, that would have to be 15% of what absurd number, 20,000 units? No, more than that, 200,000 units. So there's no way the math works. And the politicians who are talking about what they want to do, they refuse to deal in real numbers. And you all need to pin them down about how the hell they think they're going to make things happen with the policies the county has in place today. If you don't do no net loss of affordable housing, if you'll indulge me one more sad story, there's a project in Bethesda, made the Bethesda Beat News. It's a 399 unit project that's going to have 60 MPDUs in it. It replaces an 87 unit building where the 1 and 2 bedrooms were basically priced at MPDU prices today. So the developer got the density to go from 87 units to 400 units, and they reduced the number of affordable units in the building from 87 to 60.
Is this Battery Lane?
Yep.
Yeah.
That's the kind of policies we have in Montgomery County. And that's why all this talk about what they're going to do is just pure BS.
Well, unfortunately, these longer term problems are not going to be addressed tonight, but a rent cap that
Yep.
could be put in place in the short run will help thousands of renters, and especially back to our Chief of Services to End and Prevent Homelessness, the millions of dollars that the county received from federal government is now available to people who have been impacted by COVID, who are at 50% or lower area median income, which Amanda will go over, is available to
Yep.
us. So County Executive Elrich, we thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's terrific to have you. We know you're going from event to event. So much appreciated, and we'll have you back as soon as you're available.
Okay. Thank you very much.
All right, good
Bye.
night. Amanda, you're back.
Okay, let me share my screen again. As I'm doing that, I did notice some comments. There's a lot of comments in the chat, so I'm going to try and answer all the questions there. But I also just wanted to give some background on what we have done to try and address the racial disparities. We know that there have been, for hundreds of years, there has been severe housing discrimination, and the policies around housing, around criminal justice, around child welfare, the structural racism has a huge impact on how people live and whether they can afford rent, where they live, their risk of becoming homeless, their risk of being evicted. Research shows that female-headed households of color are the most likely to get evicted in Montgomery County. more than 60% of people experiencing homelessness identify as Black or African American. So we know that this is a real issue, and we have tried our best to make sure that we are targeting resources in neighborhoods where we know there is a high percentage of families of color, of families in poverty, of single parent households. And so far, over 90% of the recipients of the rent relief program are people of color. So I do feel like we are reaching the right group, I hope, but obviously we could be doing more. And I think we need everyone's help and everyone on this town hall tonight to spread the word and make sure that people are aware of the program and strongly encourage them to apply. So back to the eligibility, and let me go back to slideshow. 1 second. There we go. Okay. So back to the eligibility criteria. There was a question around freelance workers, self-employed. Yes, that would count if you weren't able to find work or your contract ended, that would absolutely count. And the other question I saw around financial hardship, even if you're working now, if at any point during the pandemic you had a financial hardship, that would qualify you for that portion of the application. So other criteria, you must have been a county resident since August of 2021. You do have to have some rent responsibility, and that can be formal or informal. So this program is certainly available to people that may not have a formal lease, but they are paying someone, and whoever you're paying would just need to provide some documentation that you owe them X amount in back rent and that your monthly rent is $500 or whatever the agreement is. But we do accept both formal and informal leases. And then the other piece is that you do need to be 2 months behind in rent at the time of application. I know that's hard for people, and there are lots of folks that are maybe 1 month behind or don't know how they're going to pay next month's rent. This program is not going to solve the affordable housing crisis. The need is massive, and even though there's been millions and millions of dollars put into this program, it still is not enough. So as the county executive said, we had to make some very tough decisions about prioritizing and targeting this to those most at risk of eviction. So what's available? So for this round, unlike in the previous rounds, we are only paying arrears. So your past rent, we will only clear the balance. There's no prospective or future assistance available at this time. Grants awarded will be either 18 months of assistance from round 3 and this round, or up to $12,000 in COVID-related rental assistance. So if you received assistance before and you've already exceeded that 12,000 cap, then we cannot provide any more assistance for you through this program, unless you are a household with extremely low income, and that's 30% AMI or below. And I know Matt is going to ask me, what does that mean as far as a dollar amount? And I do not have that off the top of my head, and I should have thought about that, but I will get that and make sure I put that in the chat. And then for those folks that are at or below 30% AMI, we can also cover utilities up to $2,000. So of note is that this is not a first come, first serve. We are going to take into account certain vulnerabilities, including income, your eviction status. As I said, we are targeting specific geographic locations that, based on our research, there's a greater likelihood that households from that neighborhood would experience homelessness or eviction. And this round, unlike previous rounds, funds are limited, and we cannot guarantee that everyone who applies and is eligible will actually receive funding. We don't have enough money to guarantee that. So I just want to be clear upfront about that. So how to apply? Also, this round is different than previous rounds. We're only keeping the application portal open for a period of time. So it will actually close at the end of June. So June 30th is the last day that you can apply. You want to make sure that you have all your information and your documentation ready, because once you open the application, you need to actually finish it. You can't go back in and add additional documentation after it's been submitted. In this round, you can apply for yourself, or you could also work with your landlord to apply on your behalf. So in the previous round, we asked that both landlords and tenants apply to either together or landlord. We need to have both pieces of the application. For this round, we don't. So if you feel more comfortable giving your documents to your landlord and having them apply on your behalf, you are more than welcome to do that. But then don't submit your own personal application. So to do that, you need to register for a tenant account and complete the application. If you need assistance with that, we have several nonprofit partners, including Renters Alliance, that can provide assistance with completing the application. And we'll make sure that all that information is posted in the chat. It's also available on the website. And you can also always call 311 and we can schedule an appointment for you to come into our offices and we can help you complete it, or we could do it over the phone. We do not accept walk-ins for application assistance. So if you do need help, we do ask that you call 311 and then we will schedule an appointment for you. The documents that you're going to need, so you'll need your income and eligibility certification, and that can be self-certified. There's a form available through the portal. Photo IDs for any household member that's over 18. And that does not have to be a government issued photo ID. It just needs to be a photo ID. So if you have a work badge or you have a CASA ID, we just need something with your name and your picture on it. Any income documentation that you might have, proof of residency, so a piece of mail, your lease, that will need your lease, the rent information, how much are you paying, how much do you owe, and then if the landlord is applying on your behalf, they must provide a tenant affidavit. So basically you sign as a tenant that you're okay with your landlord applying on your behalf. You do have to have an email address to complete the application. Email is going to be how we communicate with you. So if you need help setting that up, again, you can work with our nonprofit partners. You can call 311 to partner with us, or you can work with your landlord in setting up an email account. The applications themselves, they will all save automatically, but as I said, once you submitted, you can't make any modifications. So if you don't have all your documents, get those before you actually click submit. And again, only a landlord or a tenant application should be submitted. And there is, once you've completed the application, you can log back in, and on the homepage, it will tell you whether your application has been submitted. And then once it's actually assigned or like it's accepted, it'll say processing under review. So you will be able to check your status. Those really are the only two statuses available, but you will be able to confirm that it's been submitted.
Amanda, I just want to point people to the chat. Deputy Director of Housing, Frank Demaray, just posted what the area median income is for one person and multiple people, 30%, 50%, and so on. So people can refer to the chat if you want to understand your eligibility based on area median income.
Thank you, Frank, for doing that. Okay. So so that is the COVID rent relief round 4. If you have already received a judgment or your eviction has been scheduled, so you've received that final red and white notice, and you can see the picture here on the slide from the sheriff's office, please call 311 immediately. If you are at imminent risk of eviction, it could happen tomorrow. We certainly want to get to you and provide assistance. Whether you've applied through the portal or not, we still have programs available to assist you. And if we can, we will try and stave off the eviction so you don't actually get evicted. If there's nothing we can do, if the landlord won't accept it or there's some other complicating factors, even though we can't save that apartment, we can offer assistance and helping you relocate a new unit and getting you set up in that new unit. And the same is true for this like relocation piece. So if you were already evicted, you had a COVID related financial hardship, you're no longer in that unit, but you're maybe staying with a friend or family or couch surfing and you'd like to get back into your own unit, we can assist with that as well, but you would not fill out an application through the portal. You would just call 311 and we would assign a worker to go over your situation. So next steps, there's frequently asked questions on our website that provides many more details than I provide right now. If you have any technical questions, so if you want to know if you're having issues with the portal or there's something else going on, you can always email us at hss@montgomerycountymd.gov. I will tell you, we cannot tell you how long it will take to process your application. We do not know that at this time. This is a brand new portal. It's new software, new technology that we're using for this round. We also don't know the volume yet of how many applications we will go through. So we cannot give you an estimate of how long it will take. And it's also dependent on your unique situation. And like I said, we are prioritizing based on vulnerabilities. If at any time your status changes and you actually have received a judgment from the court or you have received that red and white, please notify us by calling 311. That's not the same as getting a letter from your landlord that says we intend to file. You still have a lot of time if they give you that. You do not have to leave. Even after they file and you've got a court date, there still is time, but that we'd like you to alert us and let us know that process.
Amanda, let me just interject because it takes a while for people to understand this, that if you're behind in your rent, you might receive a letter from the landlord or the landlord's attorney saying, either you pay up or we want you out in a few days. That's just a threat. It has no force of eviction law. It's just a threat. The landlord might then put on your door something that says a 10-day notice of summary ejectment. It's a very scary looking form. It's created by the courts by a law that the Renters Alliance is very proud to have helped pass, but it is now requiring 10 days notice before the landlord can file in court. So a 10-day notice of summary ejectment doesn't mean that you have to be out of your home in 10 days. It means that the landlord intends to file in the court in 10 days to evict you for whatever reason, usually for failure to pay rent. Once the landlord files in court, then you will receive a court summons with a date that says when you're to appear in court and for what reason. In this case, usually for failure to pay rent. Once you go to your court date, and we urge every renter to go to court. Once you go to court, and if you haven't paid your rent and the judge makes a judgment against you, then the landlord will file what's known as a writ of restitution. That is, the landlord is saying, I want them out. I'm going to fill out a form that goes to the judge that then goes to the sheriff's department. Then the sheriff's department will put a notice on your door when they schedule an eviction. That is the red and white that Amanda showed earlier. And that is the progression. And when you get that red and white, it's getting to be imminent. So understand the differences between a threat, the 10-day notice to vacate, the court summons, which is now getting serious, and then, of course, the most serious, which is the sheriff's notice.
Thank you, Matt.
And sorry, can I ask, I know there's some questions in the chat that you probably want to get to, Amanda. The two things that you mentioned, one, that I thought it was important that either a tenant or a landlord can file an application on behalf of tenants. And I know in the previous iterations of this program, it's probably a question I should have asked while the county executive was here, but in the previous iterations of this program, I know we had a conversation about what the county was trying to do to work with landlords, who know that they have a set of tenants who are in need. That clearly they don't know all the circumstances, so I'm sure they don't know whether or not their tenants exactly fit the criteria for the program. But we know that there are landlords who know generally, certainly they know tenants that are behind, right? And so, we had a conversation about how the county could work with landlords to try and sort of proffer that information to the county. I don't know if if we have worked out sort of the reasons why we couldn't do that the last time in this program. I know it's a different program with a different system, but I'm wondering if we sort of have a different lever to pull there. And then, yeah, please.
No, I'll let you finish. I'll let you finish before I respond. Go on.
The connected question was similarly, I remember us hearing from tenants or having conversations in the previous iterations of this program about the potential for someone to make it through their application, get their assistance, but the potential for landlords or that there were situations where landlords were trying not to accept the rental assistance, right? And so I'm just wondering sort of what we have in place to try to avoid some of those scenarios. And we don't know how sort of few and far between those were, but I know they came up in incidences in our conversations with you and in conversations with folks here. So those two things are things I'm wondering about.
Sure. So I will respond to the first part. We have and will continue to work with landlords on submitting applications. For our major landlords, particularly our nonprofit housers, we have assigned specific staff to work with them. We have shared information about who's applied, who hasn't. So we have been working very closely with our landlords, and we are always happy to do that with our for-profit housers as well. We need contact information, and we need to have staff available to assign them. And they could always submit bulk applications. They could always do that. What's different this time is that in the previous round, we did have to have the tenant had to fill out an application. So for this round, the tenant does not have to complete an application. However, the tenant has to supply the necessary documentation. So the tenant has to supply the COVID financial hardship. Like, the landlord isn't going to know that. The tenant has to sign that affidavit. The tenant has to provide if there's any updated income or anything that the landlord may not have. They still have to actively participate, and they have to agree. So it has to be a joint effort. A landlord cannot simply apply without the tenant's knowledge or approval, because this is still a tenant program. We want to help our landlords, certainly, but we most importantly, we want people to be able to remain stable in their homes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and for the other piece of it, there was a state law passed that now actually requires landlords to accept government checks. For some reason, they didn't have to do that before. There are still some situations, and I am not a lawyer, and I wish my deputy Alana would be able to speak to this better, but there are some times when it's just gone too far and the landlord no longer is obligated to accept any payment, that no payment will fix it. That's pretty rare, and and usually we're able to stop it if we can, if the person's eligible. And we work very closely with the sheriff's office on that as well. And they help us deliver the check to the landlord to stop the eviction.
Totally.
Does that
And a
answer?
couple questions.
Yeah. Let me just say before
sorry.
you do that.
Go
No,
ahead.
just say totally answers the question. I think reemphasizes the point that all of us were trying to make earlier to folks, that similar to the point that Matt just made about making sure you go to court, that, as we said, make sure you're in communication with your landlords about your situation. I know, things are scary. things are moving quickly, but it really behooves you to have that open communication with your landlord. As Amanda said, they don't know all the situations and circumstances. And so given some of the new flexibilities in this program, that communication could really assist you. So I appreciate your response there. Sorry, Matt.
Not at all. A couple things. Amanda, first of all, how is the new technology working? Any bugs so far?
We had a few small issues on day one, but those have been resolved.
Good.
So fingers
So
crossed.
are you pleased? Fingers crossed?
I am happy at this point. Yes, I'm happy.
Okay, well, that's good. It's good to know. It would be, we all lived through the affordable health care opening. So we're all accustomed to what it's like to launch a computer program and sometimes the challenges that can't be known until you start. But the other question was more on the ground. With the last programs, one of the confusions was, we know that you can't spend staff time focusing on problem applications forever. When I say a problem application, because documents are not coming in, you can't get in touch with the renter and so on. And therefore, the program has to say that unless we hear back from you, we're going to at least pause, focus on your application. We went from not denying you to at least closing it until we hear back. So on one hand, I want people to know that if they run into an issue here, that it's not that they may not qualify, it's that you just can't focus on it until they hear back. So I guess the big picture is, what is the appeal process? How is that going to work with you all?
Yeah, so anytime we close a case or deny a case, you will receive a letter with an explanation of why, and it will have the information about how to appeal. And if it's simply that we can't get in touch with you, if you get in touch with us, we can reopen your case. It will depend somewhat on why you didn't reach back out to us. There needs to be some extenuating circumstances that made it impossible or very difficult for you to get back with us. And that is going to be particularly important in this round, because this is limited funding. We cannot guarantee that any tenant that's eligible will receive funding. So it's really, really important that you stay in communication with your caseworker, that you provide any documents that are requested. If you don't understand them or you don't have them and you need some assistance collecting those documents, please talk to your caseworker or talk to our partners that can provide assistance with that, because I would hate for a tenant to miss out on receiving the rent relief because they just didn't get in touch with their caseworker soon enough. And then by the time they did, the money's all gone and it's already been spent.
David or Malek or Pat, is there any question or anybody else, is there any question in the chat that we've missed that we should direct at Ms. Harris? I do want to point out our gratitude to Ms. Harris for being here tonight. She is recovering from COVID and she looks great, but we know what a struggle that is. So thank you for that, and we're keeping her up.
Yeah. And while we're
Anything?
I don't see them unmuting, but perhaps while they're looking for questions, just want to reiterate my thanks, to you, Amanda, and your team. We certainly know, as we've talked about before and over the last 2 years now, right? This is not what you thought you were going to be doing 2 years ago. And so, your team has had to take a quick pivot, and certainly we know we have been advocates for you all. Hopefully you felt that in saying to other apparatuses in the county to send help to you all to do this work. But, we know how hard you all are working on this, and how deeply you care about this issue of making sure that folks are stabilizing their homes. And so I know frustrating, lots of frustrations on both sides with processes and systems, et cetera, but just want to make sure that you all know, and the folks here know, that you and your team are people who genuinely care about keeping people in their homes and are working hard to do that. So thank you for it.
Indeed. And I did notice a couple of comments in the chat that the county doesn't do enough or hasn't done anything, which is really not true. We obviously advocate for more to be done in a lot of areas, but we have not forgotten what has been done. We have seen thousands of renters receive rent relief and have their homes saved. That's something. We have seen people who have not had their rents go up through the roof because of the emergency rent stabilization bill. That's important. That's something, including me, by the way. My rent didn't go up this year, and that matters to me. And we've also heard the county executive today react to our advocacy and to your advocacy that there needs to be more done, not just in terms of building more affordable housing, but also in terms of implementing policies that protect and preserve the existing homes and hopefully affordable rents and predictable rents of our current residents. So the county is working for us. I'd be the first one to say that there's more that could be done, but we must not forget what has been done. And so we're very grateful for that. David, Malek, or Pat, is there anything in the chat that we've missed that we can give to Ms. Harris before she gets some rest?
David's gonna have a lot.
David has a clipboard, I see, so.
Dude, a whole scroll.
I just have a quick question because I'm dealing with some senior citizens who, right? And it's not just senior citizens. What happens if on June 30th, Amanda, they are 2 months behind? Can they still apply for COVID relief, rent relief?
On June 30th, yes. On
Exactly,
July
30th.
Yeah.
So they should go ahead and apply now, right? And get the ball rolling?
No, because it can't actually, you have to be 2 months behind at the time of application.
So the window closes on June 30th.
Right.
So they have to get in there real quick, right? On that date.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
That's going to be an interesting deadline to deal
Yeah.
with. We're going to have to keep track of that. I know that
Yeah.
that's where it stands now. That's what we'll support. But it will also, I imagine, Amanda, depend on how much money is left and what kind of pressure there is. So stay tuned, folks, is what I would suggest. David?
Yeah, no, thank you, Amanda, because I had a big long list that I just kind of checked off because you answered them as most of them. But yeah, a couple, y'all mentioned the technology. Some people weren't able to upload documents. It sounds like they got the application going and then ran into that. Someone else asked, is there an email for the rent relief program? I guess, can we combine those? Is there a way to reach out if you've partially applied, or do you need to call 311? Any suggestions there?
Yeah, so you can email at hss@montgomerycountymd.gov. So that is the email to communicate with the rent relief staff. I'm pretty sure that's been posted, but I'll make sure it's posted again in the chat. If you're having trouble completing the application or uploading documents, you can call 311. You can call, you can email HHS. Or you can go through one of our housing counseling agencies to get assistance. I would suggest, if you're having trouble uploading documents, to call 311 and make an appointment to come in, and we can collect the documents in the office. If you're not able to do that, then you can go through one of our partner agencies, or we can try and walk you through it over the phone.
Thank you. And another one I think you mentioned that technically covered, but I saw more than once someone ask about a prior unit where they got a non-renewal and they had to vacate and they're still behind on paying them back, but they're somewhere new. Just want to make sure we clarify. It sounds like this can't apply to that, or?
No, we cannot pay for a unit that you're no longer in. Which is all the
That's
more
something
reason to
that's-
not leave until you have to, right?
That's
So
a
even
very
if-
important point, Amanda. If you're facing eviction and because you owe rent, that if you leave, you're going to have that debt follow you. If you can qualify for this rent relief program, please apply for it before you consider leaving. If you're not sure, the Renters Alliance is here to help counsel you And if it's above our head, we'll find somebody who does have an answer for you. But please don't skip out on your apartment before you find out what your options are. As I say, if you leave with $3, $5, $10, $20,000 of debt behind, apply for the COVID rent relief program. You will not qualify, and you'll have this debt following you around. Anything else, David?
Can I ask a follow-up to that? Because there were a couple questions about tenant holding over and avoiding negative credit consequences by, through court processes. And there was another question about whether any of that is shielded if it's related to COVID. And I didn't know if there was a law that passed on that or not, or if you wanted to address any of that. Did not? Okay.
There was a law that was put forward, a bill that was put forward, but it did not pass to seal those records. I mean, it's gonna impact you one way or another. If you leave and you have a balance, it's gonna affect your rental history and your credit history. If you stay and if you go to court, but then it gets paid off, like any way you slice it, it's going to impact your future credit and rental history, unfortunately, which is really problematic. But I also just wanted to add that about the tenant holding over, like that applies too. So even if they're telling you they're not going to renew your lease, you owe money, stay there until they actually evict you, would be my recommendation.
Amanda, I see
Go ahead.
excuse me, Matt, someone just said they applied 3 times and never heard back at all. Is that something that you think maybe they didn't apply correctly, or do you reach out to everyone who puts an application in so they get some kind of correspondence from you?
Yes.
Okay.
And we try multiple times in multiple ways.
Thank you.
If somebody is out there who believes that they've applied 3 times and did not hear back, please let us know. We will give you the good news or the bad news and help guide you to fix it or tell you what the situation is. But we know something about how this works. If you applied after December 31st, there was nothing to apply to. So don't confuse the inquiry form with the application form. This program just opened up on Monday. So in between that time, there's nothing to apply to. Amanda, did you all finish processing all the applications from the previous program?
Yes, I think we may have just a few stragglers, like less than 50. But yes, we have processed.
And they will be processed in due time. So let us know about that. I think we've taken up all the time we can for Ms. Harris this evening. She knows better than anybody that this conversation is not over and that we will have to repeat it over and over and over again, because even though we had about 88 people on this call this evening, there are nearly 400,000 or more renters in Montgomery County. Tens of thousands of you all are struggling with rent, and we're only scratching the surface in terms of our outreach, which we intend to do as much as we possibly can do. So this conversation is going to continue. So again, thank you very much, Amanda Harris. Thank you. Good luck with your recovery. You sound good, but you need some rest. So thank you and good night to Amanda Harris. Now we will turn to the Deputy Director of the Department of Housing and Community Affairs, to Frank Desmarais, to give us some updates on enforcement with the end of the rent cap, renewal notices, landlord-tenant affairs, and code enforcement. Frank?
Okay, Matt, they touched on this a little bit earlier before the county executive came on, and we heard from Amanda, but just to restate, the county had a law passed in 2020, extended in November of 21, that expired on Sunday, May 15. So as of Monday, May 16, the county has no legal maximum rent increase requirement. Only in the city of Tacoma Park is there a rent increase maximum. So any landlord offering a rent renewal notice with a 90-day notice to rent increase date does not have a maximum increase percentage. And we publish on an annual basis for 30 years, a index of regional average rent increases for the prior year. We encourage landlords to reference that voluntary rent guideline. The voluntary rent guideline for the prior year was 0.4, and that was actually the maximum rent increase that was in place through the law through May 15. But as of May 16, that law is expired. Now, anyone that received a rent increase notice prior to Sunday, the maximum rent increase was 0.4%. It had to give a 90-day notice. So no actual rent increases above 0.4 are eligible for June, July, or August. The first beginning of the month that can exceed that 0.4% is September 1. And we know that landlords have begun issuing notices in excess of that limitation and at some fairly high numbers from what we're hearing. We do not have a legal position to require them to restrict that. We do have a process. We will work with tenants to believe or question whether or not their notice was issued correctly. I've put in the chat a couple of times a connection to the landlord tenant handbook. There's a section in there on rent increase notices and the requirements that are included in the rent increase notices. If the notice was not given properly, then the notice is, cannot be enforced. And so we need to hear from you. Department of Housing Community Affairs has an Office of Landlord Tenant Affairs with investigators. And I apologize for my dog's noise. But the investigators who receive many hundreds of contacts each day follow up and will work to identify if there are issues with the notices. They also can work with you as a tenant in understanding, but also helping your landlord to understand these requirements and to help mediate if, as was just mentioned by Will Roberts, staying in touch with your landlord, explaining your situation. You can negotiate. They can offer and you can negotiate, but they do not have to accept negotiation. We can encourage it. And there are circumstances where potentially, some rent increases can be looked at in violation of other elements of the landlord-tenant law. But I just want to stay with the first foremost, which is the countywide standard 0.4% increase cap has expired and there is no replacement. County executive talked about a proposal that would not become something that would be available in immediate. It will take actions by the council and it will take developing the support for it. But for the immediate future, that's where we stand on that. Matt, I don't know if you want to add further clarifications.
No, just to emphasize the point that if you've received a renewal notice prior to the May 15th end of the cap that was above 0.4%, and that was received between February 15th and May 15th, then it was a defective notice. And if you've paid more than the 0.4% increase, you need to let the Office of Landlord and Tenant Affairs know. They will require the landlord to reissue the renewal notice 90 days prospective. And if you paid above those 0.4% in a defective notice, then they're going to be required to credit forward, at least in your rent, the amount that you overpaid. So it is in your interest to make sure that that happens. And also we hope, and are working with the Office of Landlord and Tenant Affairs to do this, that if we see one or two notices like this in one community, there is an expectation that maybe there's more than that. And so we want to reach out to the entire community to alert them that these notices were defective or illegal and should have been within the county's voluntary rent increase guidelines. Before February 15th, there were different guidelines. I believe it was 1.4% for a period before February 15th, and then for a year. And then prior to that, when the rent cap was still in effect, it was 2.6%. If you have any questions about that, you can contact us at info@rentersalliance.org, and we'll give you advice. And if it looks like there's been a violation, we will guide you to the Office of Landlord and Tenant Affairs to make a complaint. Very important. This was an important law, and we want to make sure that the landlords and property managers in our region were in compliance.
Additional questions, and beyond the rent increase percentage, but the process. If landlords have not sent out a 90-day notice of a lease renewal and renewal offer and rent increase notice, if you do not get that by the time your lease expires, you automatically roll to a month-to-month lease. And if the landlord has not provided any rent increase notice ahead of that, they cannot change your rent. So you become a month-to-month tenant. At that point, or at any point, they can offer with 90 days notice a new lease following the lease requirements. They have to offer a 2-year lease, and they have to give you that 90-day notice. So the fact that if you have a July 1 lease renewal, you have not seen a notice or an offer, they can offer you a lease with less than 90 days notice, but they cannot increase your rent. And they can, so your rent would not be eligible to be increased. Another critical component is rents can only be increased once every 12 months. So the fact that this rent restriction cap was in place, any landlord that was waiting, for that as an increase, but had given a rent increase notice less than 12 months ago, cannot do another rent increase until it's 12 months from the last rent increase. So again, the details are in the landlord tenant handbook. They're also at the county's DHCA website. I've put in the chat, and I'll do it again. We have a main page. It has a lot of COVID related information, but it has a lot of tenant rights information. You can find it with our main website of montgomerycountymd.gov/renters, which is the right word leaning /RENTERS. And at that site, you'll see information about support organizations. You'll see information about legal organizations offering free legal support to tenants facing landlord-tenant action. It's been touched on a couple times this evening, but eviction processing has to follow certain specific requirements. There's information about that at the website, but there are lawyers with the Maryland Legal Aid Bureau and with a group called Homeless Persons Representation Project, HPRP, and the CASA organization that can support you in first understanding any notices you get from the court, or anything you get that's a filing that have a court date or a judgment following the court or a notice to vacate from the sheriff's office, that you should contact legal assistance. There's also a help center at the courts, free legal advice. They cannot represent you in the proceedings. The other organizations can, but the help center information is at the website as well. And you can call them. They have banks of attorneys that will answer your calls, as will the other organizations. They also have an office in the court. If you show up at court, we have arranged with the Maryland Legal Aid and Homeless Persons Representation to have attorneys present in the courthouse on the court docket dates for landlord tenant. But you can also stand in line and get time with the lawyers that are on staff with the court help center. So don't hesitate to attend court. Don't hesitate to call ahead of that, specifically ahead of that, to get advice. You may feel that you have no options, that if you're behind on rent and have no defense, but there are process steps. There are some things that have to be followed. There's also the opportunity for these legal assistance resources to help you in negotiating options with your landlord. If you're facing an eviction notice, and this gets talked about as a red and white notice because it's printed on white paper with red letters, that the sheriff's office has scheduled an eviction, and you'll get notices in the mail and you'll get a notice on your door. But if you have a judgment against you in court, you get that in the mail, and especially at the kind of end of the process when they've scheduled you and they're telling you physically with a notice on the door. Amanda was just talking about the housing stabilization services. The county has emergency money. It's not sufficient to pay large back due rent, but in a lot of cases where there is a relatively modest amount owed, or there's a need for assistance to relocate, to be able to cover moving, to cover a first month's rent or security deposit, or there's limited funds that are available. The focus is avoiding homelessness. The county's resources are committed to keeping people from being unsheltered. It doesn't mean moving to a shelter. That's an option that we will work with where we have no other options. But we do have staff with Housing Stabilization Services that will work with you, understand your circumstances, and work to see if there's a way with their money. There's money from the Emergency Action Coalition. There are a variety of organizations that support tenants working with their landlord at the a point of eviction. So every effort should be made to contact all these support organizations as early as possible. And
Thank
again,
you,
I'll
Frank.
pause for Matt.
Thank you very much, Frank. We know that that's why we have town halls twice a month, because we have to repeat this information over and over again. We understand that it's complicated. I put our contact information in the chat. If you want to need guidance, need advice, or you need guidance to these resources, that's part of what we're here to do. So get to us at info@rentersalliance.org. Let me quickly thank and introduce our vice chair of our board, Chris Perry, who's monitoring to make sure we all stay honest in these things and work at his computer with expertise. Josh Fisher, our board member, who's also been watching, and Dr. Rosetta Robinson from the Emergency Assistance Coalition. Thank you for joining us. And my staff, Melek Demir. Thanks, Chris, for the comedy relief at the end. We appreciate it. And Pat Beckham on my staff, and David Mullins, who's juggling children, and our staff meeting tonight. Will Roberts, you want to give us and Frank Demaray, of course, from Department of Housing and Community Affairs. William, some last couple of words, and then we'll say goodnight.
Sure, and also want to thank Amanda Harris again for being with us, and thank all of you, for joining us. I know this is a lot of information, as Matt said. It's why we do these more than once a month, but it's so critical, and so I hope folks have been jotting down the contact info in the chat. I know David put the YouTube link in the chat, and you can find this conversation posted up on YouTube as early as probably tomorrow, Matt, when we're going to post it, but so you can go back to it and get the information. But I think one of the keys here, I know that we are sort of in crisis mode still, right? And a lot of information coming at folks, a lot of shifting windows and doors. I think one of the keys here is to make sure that you as a renter know that you have rights that you can avail yourself of. What we don't want to happen is that people get inundated and overwhelmed and either self-evict, walk away, etc., given the challenges that might be in front of you, depending on your particular situation. But one, you have rights that you can exercise, and you heard from folks at the county level who want to help you exercise that. You heard from folks here at the Renters Alliance, and we talked about the work that we do and the work that our partners do to make sure that you can exercise those rights and get access to these streams of information. So we want to make sure that you can exercise and assert your rights and keep yourselves housed and stabilized. We want to work with you on that end. But you also heard some conversation about the other work that we do and goes on the policy side. And so given that the county executive broke a little bit of news tonight, you'll be hearing more about how that's going to play out, and if indeed that is going to move forward. We will be, sort of at the gates, advocating again for those increased protections. But as Frank said, very importantly, we have to sort of exist in the world, live in the world as it exists right now. And so sort of laid out sort of where things are on the parameters, but more to come on the additional protections that we might be able to advocate for. But in the meantime, definitely continue to be in touch with us, info@rentersalliance.org. All of our information there, and we want you to stay safe, be well, avail yourself of your rights, and hang in there as we continue to fight this affordability crisis and advocate with you and for you for our renter community across the county. So with that, we want to thank you for coming out, thank our partners, and wish you all a good night and good health.
Yes, thank you, Will. By the way, reminder, everybody, if you can't see that, there it is.
There it is.
We have these buttons and we didn't get them for nothing. So we expect you all to register and vote for the candidates of your choice. Renters have a voice. We are the first organized votes for renters, and we expect renters to participate in the democratic process of our communities. So thank you. As Will Roberts said, good night.